Hello, my friend. This is Clyde. Faith does not settle. Hebrews 11:22. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, referred to the promise of God for the exodus of the sons of Israel from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones in the land of the promise. It is easy to settle. For many people, they settle because they feel that what they originally wanted is slowly getting out of reach. Others settle because they are being practical, acknowledging that the ideal choice might be unrealistic or unattainable. Still, others settle because of someone persuading them to stop reaching for what might seem out of reach. It is amazing how settling can seem good in the eyes of some people, but for others, they live with regrets and the constant reminder that says, if only I had fought a little harder, or tried a little harder, or waited a little while longer. Our text today is about a man who would not settle because his faith made him persist. Let us explore the character of Joseph and learn from his faith. Joseph was the 11th son of his father Jacob and the first of two sons for his mother Rachel. Notice who was his father: the grandson of Abraham. Why is that important? Abraham was this man who God called out from his home country and promised to give his descendants this prosperous country and would, in addition, make his descendants a great and prosperous nation. This never happened in the lifetime of Abraham, and no doubt he told his son Isaac about the promise. Isaac had two sons, twin boys, and he made certain to tell the boys of the promise. For some reason, Jacob ended up becoming the son through whom the promise of God to Abraham and Isaac would pass through. Now we see Jacob fathering 12 sons. So how was this going to work out? Simple. All 12 sons were selected to be carriers of the promise, and it was this point onward that we see them becoming heads of tribes. Their descendants were known because of the tribe they came from, hence the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph was one of the heads of those tribes. Stay with me a little while longer. Jacob and his large family settled in Canaan, but like their grandfather and father, they were not citizens of that country. They were allowed to live there. Canaan was the place God had promised to give their forefathers, but they had to wait until that happened. Meanwhile, Joseph was sold by his brothers and made a slave in Egypt, and from being head slave to a noble Egyptian, he ended up in prison. But there was the miraculous transition from prison to becoming the second in command in Egypt, overseeing a massive economic and food program during the widespread 7-year famine that the known world experienced, including the faraway country of Canaan. Well, time went by, and through a series of favorable events, old man Jacob and his family migrated to Egypt, where Joseph was the second in command during the famine, and Joseph's boss, Pharaoh, ordered that Joseph's family be allowed to live in the best part of the country in a place called Goshen. They were also given special privileges to be well cared for as far as food for themselves were concerned. They were living a fantastic life during the famine. So now we come to the text. Years have passed, and the Hebrew people have settled in and living a good life. As you can well imagine, their families grew. The old man Jacob died and was buried back in Canaan. Years passed, and now Joseph, being 110 years old, was facing death. Joseph was the second most important person in Egypt. He and his large family lived in the best section of the country. All of Egypt respected him and treated his family well. Yet, on his deathbed, Joseph spoke of a promise God gave his ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and his father Jacob. This promise was never fulfilled, and obviously Joseph never forgot it. In Genesis 50:24 and 25, Joseph spoke about the promise. He told his family that this might be good. We might be living a good life here in Egypt, but this is not our home. This is not what God promised our forefathers. He promised them the country of Canaan, and we cannot and will not settle. So here's my request. I know that God is going to keep his promise, but I don't know when. But you make me a promise. The day God comes to lead our people to the land of Canaan, promise me that you will take my mortal remains and bury them in that land God had promised our forefathers. Do not leave my mortal remains in Egypt. I will not settle for a permanent grave in a foreign country. I want to be buried in the promised land. You are asking, where in that is faith? I'm glad you asked, because Joseph also believed the promise. Joseph knew that God is a promise-keeping God, and based on the history of his family, he also knew that God might not come true when you want him, but he'll be there right on time. Joseph knew that sometime, even after I am dead, God's promise will come true. That was his faith. And so he would not settle for less than what God had promised his people. Take my bones when God orders the exodus of our people out of Egypt, and bury me in the promised land. Faith believes in God and takes him at his word. Faith does not harbor doubt. Doubt makes you think of alternatives. If God does not come true, then let me fall back on plan B. Why was Joseph making such an unreasonable demand? It is because he knew of the promise God made, and he never doubted that the promise would be fulfilled. By making this demand on his family, Joseph was saying, the promise might not come in my lifetime, but I know deep down it will happen. God will lead our people into the promised land. Faith has no room for alternatives. That brand of faith pleases God, and he honors that faith. Faith does not settle for less than what God has promised you. No, my friend. That is faith, believing God to keep his word. Child of God, you know that whatever God has promised you, there is something close to it, something that would make good for plan B in case God does not turn up on time. But that is settling. Do not settle. Hold on, my friend, to what God has promised you. Do not look to the left or to the right. Do not settle for anything less than what God has promised.